All right. So excited for you guys to be here live today because we'll have some good discussion time. But really happy and excited to have Linsly here today and her partner Jen, who's going to be showing up in a few minutes. She was coming off of another commitment. But I met Linsly, I don't know, gosh, over a year ago now, but she was in our 6 month trial, women's trial, and we just hit it off. I love her energy and passion, and she's sort of an expert on all things women's wellness and longevity, and she's a avid sort of experimenter, and she'll talk about that, I'm sure, of like, how do you figure out what things are right for you as you're going through your own health and wellness journey. But her and Jen have a podcast called It's Time that I was on probably almost a year ago now.
Yes.
But you guys should definitely check it out. They're a great dynamic duo. That's part of why I was so excited to have them here today. They're just, I feel like you'll feel inspired after today, no matter what, because they just have infectious energy. So, Linsly, I'll let you kind of take it away and introduce yourself and go from there.
Awesome. Thank you, Ashley. That's such a kind introduction. And thank y'all for showing up. I recognize some of your faces from the 6 month of doing the BFR program, which I love. And I'm so excited to talk with y'all. So Jen and I met in this space serendipitously because we both live in Park City. Dr. Jen Wagner is my partner, and we were working out together. And as we were working out together, the woman who runs that workout facility, similar to Ashley, was like, "Hey, you guys should talk. You're doing the same thing. You're working with midlife women to help them figure out how to power up and get fired up for what we call not old and retired, we call the high half. Like it's the high half of life. Like, how do you get your body re-energized and then your mindset in the right place so that it's like a time of thrival?" And so that's the work that Jen and I do together. And we've developed a series of workshops and programs and this podcast really organized around 6 core tenets, which we'll kind of blow through quickly today. And that's how we got to spend time working with Ashley's, because one of the six, no surprise, is movement. And we believe BFR is one of the best tools in your toolkit for really how to optimize movement. So um, that's kind of how we got to where we are. And if you'll give me a sec, I'll start screen sharing here and we can jump into some materials. But this is so intimate and it's casual. So just stop me, ask me questions. Jen will join in as she can, and then we will kind of just take it from there. So let me stick this thing in slideshow view so it's a little bit easier to see. There we go. Okay. So thrival. So we talk about it as in terms of thrival, and that is actually a word now. When we first started using it, we thought we made it up, but it turns out it's a word. The definition is to do more than just survive, to really optimize and enjoy and engage and thrive. So we want to be all about supporting women, and specifically kind of this cohort of women between, call it 40 and 70, 75, where we think it's like the secret weapon of the world. If we could power up this cohort, because there's so much experience and time and energy that this cohort of women can deploy on whatever it is they're passionate about. So we think they're the secret weapon for the world. So that is our call to action, is how to make sure we support women and thrive. This is our podcast, just to stick it in front of you in case you're out there on Spotify or all the places you hear podcasts. It's called It's Time. I have found that there are a gazillion podcasts with the word time in them. So if you search the name Linsly, which I've only met one in 56 years, it'll come up right away. So that is our podcast. And we're a little weekly. It's pretty quick, 40-minute podcast. This is Jen, and so you'll have a chance to meet her in a minute, but I just wanted to give you context of where she's coming from. She's a collegiate athlete. She started her life as a doctor, and specifically as an anesthesiologist in pediatrics, which I can't imagine more challenging or scary pediatric, surgery type support. But she did that and excelled. And then she kind of hit her midlife and was like, what else do I want to be doing? This is a way to impact people, but I want to impact people at a larger scale. So when she and her family moved to Park City, she got involved with a group called the Liminal Collective, which is a pretty cool organization around how to optimize athletic performance. So she got really deep in the world of athletes and how to really optimize that performance. And as she was in there, she was like, "Hey, we're talking mostly about male physiology. It turns out females are, 51% of the population. I want to support females." And so she got deep into supporting female physiology and wellness and launched her own company around that called Prosper, which really serves B2B relationships and works with people like Stanford and the Olympics around how to motivate and maintain women in the workforce so that they are energized at home and in their professional world. So she works with clients that way. And then no surprise, she's such a rock star. She was recruited to go lead the performance and health optimization, thought leadership, and programming at the Canyon Ranch, at one of the luxury spots in the world where I think we should all go and have some retreat information. So that's kind of where she's coming from. And then she and I do this podcast week to week. I'm coming to you from a different perspective. My whole career was in 24/7 startups. I moved to Park City from Marin, from the Bay Area. And from kind of 95 until 2018, I was all about tech and media startups, came from the Bain strategy world. So that context is only relevant because I took that mindset when I got into this question around how to optimize my physical and my mental self. And I threw that mindset into data accumulation and synthesis. And I think it was our friend over at SuperAge, David Stewart, who said, I'm going to brand you a citizen scientist. And as Ashley alluded to, I literally test everything possible and I run like a data set of N of one. And then I read out on, do I actually have an outcome that I associate with this? Or is it a nice to have? And then when I'm working with clients, I try to frame things in the context of when we're trying things, let's pick things that are exciting and energizing in your mind to try, and then map it against where is there a lot of data and start to pick it from the quadrant of really like it and a lot of data and test and see what is worth implementing. And again, this is how BFR came onto the screen is it's got a huge amount of science and it's really low friction to implement. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. And then I come up with a series of mindset certifications. But with that as context, what we wanted to share today, and please stop me as we go along, because I think a lot of this is stuff you might have been exposed to already, you might have questions about. So I want to make sure we get to those questions, which is really the meat of it. But we think about longevity and thrival around 6 core pillars. Our whole reason for being is about living better right now and for the long haul, not just living longer. But we come at that because when you get into some of this research, and we're hearing more about this in the mainstream media, but some of the statistics that kind of put me on, I red alert, I should pay attention, is that I think this was from the Cleveland Health Clinic that said today's 50-year-old has a 50% chance to live beyond 100. And you can read those words. And when I share this with clients or in a workshop setting, more than half of the crew is like, that sounds exhausting. Like, I don't want to do that. That's just beyond 100. No, thank you. But the reality is we might not have the choice, right? So we call this binary intentionality. There are going to be tools and levers to help us live longer. And then there's going to be medicine and medical solutions to help us live longer. But what we want to make sure we've equipped people with are what are the solutions that help you thrive for that life? So we talk a lot about health span and thrival, because whether we like it or not, we might be living a lot longer. So we might as well live a lot longer. So that's the context for it. And then I'll see if we can get this little pyramid up here. These are the 6 pillars that we ground all of our programming and our recommendations around. And everything we do, we try to do it in the sense of, is this actionable? Like, is it actually believable in the normal woman's life and day to day that these actions can be taken? And so that's where we come from. But we start with kind of the core pillar. No surprise, but it's around mindset and building your fundamental brain capability to carry your mindset forward. So we believe that it's hard to do anything if your head's not in the right place. But what we also are so excited about is you can get your head in whatever place you want to get it in with the reality of neuroplasticity and the understanding that we can rewire our brains. When I first started to talk about neuroplasticity, especially with my teenagers, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited about this neuroplasticity. Like, this is such new science. When I was growing up, we thought our brains stopped at 25, but all the science is coming out that we can rewire our brain like you would rewire an electrical circuit. And, it's new science 20 years ago. And my daughter looks at me and she's like, Mom, I'm 16. Like, that's old science to me. It's before I was born. But to me, it's still exciting and new science to think about. So we'll start with mindset and brain building and how to actually do it versus, the laundry list of ideas that you might have seen out there with different influencers. And then we'll go really quickly through movement because you've got the answer to that sitting right here on the call leading us, Ashley. We'll talk a lot about sleep. Sleep has gotten a ton of awareness, which is exciting, but the reality is it's still a challenge for many women. And so what we'll get to are some of the tools that can help. And Jen's a deep expert here. We'll hit on the highlights of the nutrition nourishment thing. This is a conversation that seems to never end. And so we want to try to ground it in the foundational highlights and then be able to answer questions as you're hearing more and more news hit your screens. The fifth one, connection, I think the more and more that Jen and I have gotten into the research, the more we actually think this should be number one or two, and that is how to keep your community and your connection to a community active and engaged. And then the sixth pillar is something that we just call the beyond, and it's all the research and the practices that are coming to life around how critical it can be to believe that there is more than you or more than us in this context. And what are some practices outside of the traditional, maybe religious practices that can help facilitate that lever of thrival? And then we just always keep a little point at the top saying bonus points, emerging modalities, because people often have questions about, tell me about red light, or tell me about contrast therapy, or what about, whatever new gadget is getting a bunch of awareness. And so we try to stay abreast of that and be here to answer if you've got some of those that have hit your screens and you want some feedback on it. Sound good?
Cool. Yes.
All right. So we will jump right in. And then as we kind of talk about doing these different ideas, we always share this. This is James Clear work from Atomic Habits. As you look at these ideas and maybe you want to pick and try a few, we just always want to invite kind of grace and patience with yourself. We all sometimes have huge appetites. I mean, luckily it's not January 1st because that's when we tend to have the biggest appetites for change, and we're going to do this and we're going to do that. But when you pick something, just pick small ones and know that the implementation is not linear. And the kind of phrase we like to use a lot is, set the bar low, just set it low and clear it. And then set it low again and clear it. So baby steps really, really matter. So Jen will join us to get into the mechanics of the brain. But as we talk about actually rewiring your brain and the neuroplasticity to it, I just wanted to get a sense, is everyone familiar with the studies around the neuroplasticity catalysts, like the taxi drivers and when blind people read and things like that, how their brains actually physically manifest? Just raise hands. Yeah, more or less. The woman who was kind of the pioneer of that science, and she did it like 40 years ago, recently passed away, but it was the imaging where she could show the physical rebuilding of parts of brains or parts of our brain center based on the activity that the person was learning. So that's a foundational study. If you get interested in this at all, we've got a ton of links to it and research behind it, but it's sometimes I pause a minute on here because when we're doing things, it's worth reminding ourselves that it's worth the time to do it. And so whatever you want to rewire, that's the kind of just this icon of you can rewire and repot your brain. And the science says you can. So just believe it's worth your time. And then I'm gonna pause right here. And then can you tell, Ashley, has Jen joined us yet?
I have not seen her come in.
Okay, I want to make sure she has a chance. She is such a deep expert on some of the science of the brain. So I think if it's all right with you, Ashley, I'm going to skip the science of the brain and have her come back to it because I can tell you what she's told me, but she is the doctor and the expert on that arena. So I'm going to skip all that. And she's going to talk also about hormones. And I think it's just critical to kind of always reiterate how helpful some of the hormone therapies can be. So if we get into the mindset and the brain building piece and see that, okay, the term positivity and positive toxicity got a ton of play, especially right after COVID. And so we kind of always want to ground ourselves in what does positivity mean? What are we talking about? And why is it worth your time? And so these are just quick summaries. And again, the reason why we include this is sometimes these mindset practices seem either frivolous or they seem time consuming or they don't feel natural to us. And so as you're picking and choosing mindset practices, for me, as the kind of the data hound that I came from in my background, I needed to see the data about why it mattered. And so this is just a synthesis of about 50 different research reports around why bother investing in growing your positivity muscle like you would grow your bicep or you would grow your glutes or you would strengthen your quads? It's important to grow your positivity muscle because it is directly tied to longevity. So the average kind of lifespan increases 15% with people who define themselves with an outlook that is like plus 5% positive. So some of the studies are around optimism and some of them are just around, I feel happy about life. But when you synthesize the studies, it's about a 15% increase in the amount of time you get on the earth. And then more importantly, it's between 15 and 50% improvement in how healthy that time on the earth is. So the metrics that have been tracked to that are around reducing inflammation, reducing cardiovascular events, which I think we all know is the number one killer for women, reducing cancer and reducing all the cognitive decline that we want to fight so that we enjoy that day to day, and then increasing the things we are all looking for, energy, activity level, and then performance. And then the other metrics that have been measured and kind of synthesized here are the improvements in your mental health, like the reduction in anxiety and depression and some of the neurodivergent symptoms, and then increased sense of being happy and joy and having peace. But then also things like people who define themselves on that positive side and on the optimism side have higher professional metrics, higher financial metrics, better team performance, and better social satisfaction and family relationships. And I think one of the deepest studies around this was Dr. Barbara Fredrickson, who's still active at Chapel Hill. But she and her team went through and categorized how many positive words people used in different contexts, like a sports team or a business context or a family context. And they found something that they called the Losado ratio, which was the data behind what is a positivity bias. What does that actually mean if you manifest it in numbers? And so this is called the Losado ratio. It's a positivity quotient of 3 to 1. And how that translates in like the practical day to day, we've all heard the examples of why we are wired into a negativity bias. Because when we were back in the day, we were cave people. If there was a saber-toothed tiger, we had to be able to look at. So we had to be looking for things that were scary. And that's our natural wiring. So when you try to rewire yourself to this positivity bias, the math that came out of all of these different contexts was a 3 to 1 ratio of 3 positive emotions, words, events relative to 1 negative. And the thing that was interesting about this ratio is if you get much higher than 3, it starts to feel like it's inauthentic. But if you don't get as high as 3, you're not able to shift that innate negativity bias that we all have as humans into a more positive realm. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's kind of the why is it worth doing a positivity bias and how. And then what we'll just have available if it's of interest with Ashley is just a series of mindset practices. When we do workshops with people in a much deeper dive, this is like the mindset gym, right? So we look at it and say, okay, some degree, most people have heard about something around each one of these practices. But if you get into the nitty-gritty about how do you do an evening routine and a morning routine that's most efficient, how do you tackle your inner voice, and how do you categorize what are your saboteur voices and what are your sage? Each one of those line items is a pretty deep program if you are curious about mindset gym practices. And the ones that are bolded are the ones that Jen and I would put on offer as the highest bang for your time buck, so to say. So the evening routine and the morning routine, the evening routine is like, if you can only do one thing, do the evening routine because you get double the impact. You close your day well and you set the next day up well. So the evening routine kind of rule of thumb that we say is 3, 2, 1. So, stop doing any kind of like big eating if you can, alcohol if you can, before 3 hours before you go to bed. 2 hours before you go to bed, wind down any kind of work. And then an hour before you go to bed, unplug from screens. And then in that 2 hour window, it's worth taking the time to recap 3 things that worked really well for you. People sometimes call it a gratitude practice, a wins practice, and then one thing that you want to set up for success the next day. And so it's simple. It's like a little 4 or 5 minute practice, but it helps your brain rewire to say, I'm focusing on what worked today, even if like 5,000 things didn't work, because that's many of our days. I'm going to seed in my brain the three things that did work. And then I'm going to tell my brain before I go to bed what I want to work tomorrow. So that's kind of one thing you can pull. We would put that one on offer. And then the morning routine is a similar idea, which is before you even open your eyes, to tell yourself it's going to be a great day, to tell yourself what you want out of the day, and then come out of the bed. And we've all seen the research about not picking up our smartphones. We've seen a bunch of the research about get outside or meditate or whatever other practice feels like you get to start the day on your terms is worth scheduling in the morning routine. And then the rest of these, the inner voice, the sabotage stage, we put this on here because we all have a version of this, and there are different programs and platforms that we would put on offer to go through and kind of recalibrate those voices. But it's mostly just to remind us that we all have them and not to give them too much credence, but also not to pretend they're not there. So you want to, when you see a thought come up, decide if it serves you or not. And if it doesn't serve you, you actively say, okay, I'm making room for a different thought that will serve me. On the pause and reframe and the language matters, the science around this to me was the most interesting. Does anybody speak Spanish or Italian or French on the call right now? Anybody speaks kind of a romance-based language?
Je parle français.
Oui. Um, the thing that drove this point home for me is I speak Spanish, and the idea of using the verb be versus feel. So if you say something like I am tired, your subconscious wires it down to like your DNA, your bones. Whereas I feel tired, your subconscious realizes that's transient. It's not a big a deal. So you feel this a lot like in Spanish and I think in French as well and Italian is I am, and the verb be itself has two different forms, permanent and temporary. So our psychology behaves differently depending upon which one we choose. So in our English language, it's just being mindful that if you say something like, I feel tired, it's not as dampening as I am. So if you can use the am word choice for things you want to amplify and the feel word choice for things you maybe want to dilute a little bit, it's just a small tactic you can do for mindset. And then we have a series of podcasts that get into the science around why mantras, affirmations, cards, intentions work, what's the actual science underneath it, and what's the easiest way to practice that. So I would invite you to listen to those. They're pretty quick, 30-minute podcast. Similarly, around heart skills, the good news is all of these things have deep science around why they're effective. The thing we call out in edge builders, we've heard the term misogi get a lot of awareness, and grit and things that are kind of like, resilience oriented, but also boredom. Boredom, there's a bunch of science around boredom is good for us too. So sometimes that's nice to grab on a Saturday afternoon and be like, hey, the science says I should be bored right now. That's okay. To be productive. So that's a reminder, permission to grab it. PQ reps, meditation and prayer, this science around all of these is how your brain waves are rewired through each of these practices. But sometimes meditation's not available to everyone. Sometimes prayer is not available to everyone. So PQ reps are something that was developed out of the work of Shirzad Charmaine, Stanford-based professor and doctor, and he built a program and then backed up, with I think 6 million users around. Can you physically like touch your fingers, kind of like tapping, and squeeze your fingers when you need to have the effect of meditation or prayer, but you're in a public setting? So let's say you're in a team meeting or family dinner, and you want to bring down the cortisol, kind of doing the squeeze your fingers or squeeze your hands or push the balls of your toes into the earth is another way to access that same calm down mechanism. And so that's what PQ reps are. And then journaling has gotten, just centuries of awareness and practice. The reminder we always say, and this is really, especially when I'm talking to people sub 30 years old, is physically writing has a different effect on your brain structure than typing. So if you want to really drill it in, physically write it. Physically write your affirmation. Physically write what you want to see in the future. Breath work, lots of great work around that. We have a few episodes on that too. The hugs one I put in, mostly because when I'm working with teenagers in my own home too, is hugs really matter. The physical contact matters. And so there's the bit of science here. This was actually a Utah professor who pioneered this at the University of Utah. The math ended up being 8 hugs a day for 8 seconds a day. I mean, 8 seconds a hug. So give your friend a hug and count to 8. Give your kid a hug. Give your partner, whatever it is, and let them know it's the science that you're trying to help increase oxytocin and serotonin, and you're doing a neurochemistry favor when you hug for 8 seconds. The 6 second rule is, if you have a partner or somebody you want to engage with, kissing for at least 6 seconds triggers the same thing. So the quick peck on the cheek doesn't, but the 6 second kiss does. So 8x8 and 6 second rule. And then self-care. We always want to end on this idea that self-care is priority one. That you can't show up in the world for the people you want and the things you care about if you haven't cared for yourself first. So picking some kind of self-care routine and prioritizing it is job 1, and 2 and 3 as well. So that is kind of on the mindset stuff. If I pop into movement, is Jen with us?
Jen is here. Yeah.
Hey, hi, Jen.
Hi, everybody. Sorry I'm late. Thanks for including me.
We're so happy you're here, Jen, because we're about to get into movement. But if you don't mind, I'm going to scroll back and have you just talk about the brain, because I don't want to talk about the brain
Awesome.
without you here.
You don't want to talk about the brain? Oh, you're so good at talking about the brain.
Well, it's because I'm
Awesome.
telling what you told me. So we talked about neuroplasticity, and then we covered that, and then we're going here.
Okay. So I think this is really important. And I've kind of scrolled through who's joining us today, and it looks like we have predominantly women on this call, which is so fun for me to talk about. So I think this is an amazing area of study that's continuing to evolve right now, in the fact that we share 99% of our genes across our species. Yet that 1% difference is in every cell of the body. So when Linz and I talk about women's health and what that means, it's so far beyond like the traditional bikini medicine, right? Women's health is in every organ system in every cell of our body. And that means we see changes in every organ system in every cell of our body as we change through our life cycles. So just some differences in our brain structure. The female brain tends to be a little bit smaller and more compact than the male brain. And we have the same number of neurons. They're just kind of more tightly wound in there. Not shocking to anyone, we have larger centers for communication and language. We tend to communicate better. Men have larger structures for sexual drive and aggression. Their amygdala is larger, which is the part of our brains that processes fear and aggression and anger. Women have a larger hippocampus, or the female brain, I should say, has a larger hippocampus, which means we can regulate emotion a little bit better. We are better at forming memories, and those things come a little more naturally to us. You can go to next, Linz. I think you're driving.
There we go. Yep.
So when we look at the hormone impact, and we're not going to spend a whole lot of time here today, it's just important to know that all of these hormones that we consider female-based sex hormones affect our cognition and affect our brain and affect how we see the world. So we have 3 types of estrogen, estradiol being the most common type and the most prevalent type throughout our life cycle. We have estriol, which we see during pregnancy, and estrone, which is our predominant estrogen in menopause. And each estriol and estrone have a lower, they are not as powerful as our estradiol. So, and then we have progesterone, right? And progesterone is our kind of the yin and the yang of estrogen, right? Estrogen is our prominent kind of anabolic, amps us up, fertilizer, really, if you think about that. It kind of fertilizes every organ system in our body and promotes growth and sprouting of neurons, etc. Progesterone kind of backs that off. Progesterone comes in, and especially in the brain, helps prune things. Because if we have neural pathways that are not serving us, maybe we were a smoker, and that neurocognitive pathway is defined in our brain. Progesterone, if we've stopped smoking and want to remove that habit and remove that pathway, progesterone helps with that. It trims back what's not needed anymore. So, and then FSH and LH are other hormones that, they come from our brains to drive our estrogen and progesterone production. You want to keep going, Linz?
You bet.
So when we lose estrogen's effect in the brain, it does several things. One, estrogen plays a crucial role in our hypothalamus for regulating our temperature. This is where hot flashes and night sweats come from, right? It is the loss of estrogen in our hypothalamus. It is a central nervous system issue. Other things, when we lose progesterone, we start to get anxious, right? Progesterone is that calming hormone. And that's often the first sign or symptom of perimenopause is we feel a little on edge. We might be a little bit quick to anger or a little more anxious and definitely might have some trouble sleeping. And that's all signs of progesterone withdrawing and not having the levels that we're used to. So that's why oftentimes when we talk about hormone replacement therapy and where we often start with progesterone often if sleep is the first problem. And the reason we lose progesterone first is it comes from the lining of the egg that's been ovulated. So if we've stopped ovulating, we've stopped getting that nice progesterone bump. And so that's why we often see it. While estrogen is still on its rapid roller coaster, our progesterone is kind of silently in the background, just sliding downward. And so we start to feel that anxiety and irritability and having trouble sleeping often is the first signs. And we're kind of like, what is going on? And then as estrogen starts to fall, we tend to get more hot flashes and vasomotor changes like that.
Yep. Well, I think one of the things that was really compelling when you started to share this with me, Dr. Jen, was, estrogen is like testosterone is for men, is what estrogen is for women. And so if we want to build muscle and we want to keep our bones, menopause hormone therapy is a pathway to supporting that.
Absolutely.
Okay, so that we just kind of cruised through the brain and the mindset, and we were just popping into movement. And we just have the one thought here since Ashley's, dominating best practices for movement already.
Absolutely. So here, what we're thinking about is really what do you want to be doing 20, 30, 40 years from now? And how do we reverse engineer that to where we need to be right now? So, for Lynn's, it's traveling the world, skiing with her kids, picking up a grandchild. What's important to you as an individual? And then how do we craft your fitness goals now to make sure that you are on track to be able to do those things? And so I think this is a really powerful way to stay motivated and to kind of shape your routines and your habits to really meet your personal goals. Maybe you want to do an Ironman at 80, or maybe, just preserving as much independence as possible for as long as possible. And those are all goals that we can address with what we're doing right now.
Yeah. I think one of the most compelling ways you put this for me is I like to travel. So if I want to lift my suitcase, which is 30 pounds, I got to be able to do shoulder presses that are 45 pounds now. Got to do that. Or probably, and I need to pack more lightly.
And a little bit of both.
Yeah. Yeah. And then after you've gotten the movement, you got to recharge, right?
Right. So this is my favorite thing to talk about. And then I promise I'm going to stop talking and let Linsly talk again. So sleep. By training, I'm an anesthesiologist. I spent the first half of my life not sleeping. Every third night on call. Never had a chance to catch up and decided to have 2 kids in that time frame as well. This is our greatest life support system. Outside of movement, if you prioritize one thing in your life, I will tell you, please prioritize your sleep. It is not a reward for a hard day, working a hard day. It is a absolute prerequisite to get up and crush the next day. Okay. So if we are not sleeping, we are not going to be able to perform the way we want to the following day, whether that is in the community, in the boardroom, in the gym, you name it, our performance suffers if we're not sleeping. So I think, sleep is when our brain cleans itself. We have a whole organ system dedicated to that. It's called our lymphatic system. It washes our brain. It cleans out proteins and waste products that we know contribute to dementia and Alzheimer's. It also cleans out inflammatory products that we know contributes to chronic disease, heart disease, metabolic disease, cancer, neurodegenerative disease. All of that your body takes care of when we sleep. So what is quality sleep? 7 to 9 hours. Okay. And that's 80% of the time. That doesn't mean we're going to get that 100% of the time. If 80% of the time we can aim for 7 to 9 hours. Lynn's already tacked on a morning and an evening routine, and I'm just going to double tap on that because that is crucial. We have to wind down our day. If you remember if you've had small kids in your universe, bedtime's crucial, right? Nobody interrupts bedtime. There is a bath, there's a story, there's a wind down routine. We try to, and to steal my friend David Stewart's line, we try to crash the plane as adults. We try to be flying at 30,000 feet, 800 miles an hour, jump into bed and expect that our bodies and our minds are just going to relax, shut down, and prepare for sleep. It doesn't work like that. So double tap on having an evening wind down routine, enforcing your self-care at that part of the day, and really letting your day unwind and preparing for sleep. Just like you would prepare for your workout or your next work day, you need to pay attention to that preparation for a good night's sleep. And then Lynn's touched on this too. Really great data coming out about when we reach for our phones or our computers first thing in the morning before we're even out of bed, what that does is it creates this big dopamine hit in our brain first thing in the morning. And we are intelligent beings. Our brains start to anticipate that. So what happens? We degrade the last 2 hours of our sleep because our brain is starting to anticipate, I am going to get this big hit. And so we don't sleep as deeply. And that second half of the night is when that really regenerative and important REM sleep is occurring. It's where we're forming long-term memories, solidifying learnings, and really letting our bodies and our minds mend from the day's stress before. So it's really crucial to preserve those last few hours. And we can send you this, there's just the quick, fast rules: cold, dark, quiet, consistent. If I have to give you 4 things.
Yeah. And when we started doing this together, I mentioned I was the citizen scientist as a kind of a humorous title, but sleep was one of my challenges. And, Dr. Jen had made it clear that that was something I needed to address. So I wore all of the wearables, the Oura, the Whoop, we have an 8 mattress, and started playing with levers to say which ones translated to data-driven performance in sleep. And HRV being the metric, how much deep sleep I got versus REM sleep. And the things that I found that were actually super accessible were the bath, taking a bath before you get to bed, even if it's a 15-minute bath, definitely the 3-2-1 routine. And then the one that Dr. Jen taught me that's just been really hard to do, especially with teenagers, is going to bed consistently and making sure that that bedtime is at least a couple hours before midnight. Because no matter what your circadian rhythm is, if you go to bed after midnight and you sleep 8 or 10 hours or whatever it is, you don't get the deep sleep. You don't get the restorative sleep. And so that is like a small tactic to be able to implement a more effective sleep routine that data-driven for scientists N of 1 showed measurable results. Okay, nourish. So we'll just stick to the highlights here. I know that Ashley's had some great nutritionists on. We're big fans of Jay and also for hormone therapy of Yumi. But the rules of thumb to keep it really simple, no matter what your dietary mix is or your nutrition philosophy is, again and again and again, it's protein, 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 protein. And we all have heard a lot about protein, especially in the last 2 years. And it's still hard to hit the target amount, but it's 1 gram of protein per pound is really what we're targeting, like whatever your ideal pound target is, if you're playing around with body comp questions. But the challenge is really how to get it. And so, frankly, for Jen and for me, like there's no way to get this without using things like protein drinks and protein supplements. It's just the volume of food required to get this much protein in is often uncomfortable for female physiology. But that doesn't mean it's not important. So again, N equals 1. But when I changed my protein consumption, that's when I started to see a ton of change in combination with things like BFR in my muscle tone and my body comp. And so it just is a non-negotiable. So it's protein powder in your coffee. I pound a 41 gram, like ready to drink thing from Slate in the morning just to get 40 grams down, so it seems like a lot of volume. And that's what I hear from people again and again is I just can't get that much in. And it's worth trying other tools to help you get it in. The other thing I think we hear a lot about is leucine. It's one of the reasons why things like bone broth don't count, is that it's not a full set of amino acids, and you need to have leucine in the protein as well. Very common. You can get it from a vegetable and a meat source, but you just want to be mindful that you're kind of looking for that, and if you're fine tuning the balance. And then the importance of fats. I think carbs are something we're all really familiar with, and how to get the clean carbs and trying to get whole food carbs. But we have a couple of examples when we're working with people in the workshop context that sometimes the clean carbs don't feel good in our gut. Like we hear that from a lot of women, that this is like, I feel bloated, it feels uncomfortable. And one thing to check for is if you're the type of person whose chemistry has a reaction to highly oxidative vegetables. So that's things, or oxalative, sorry, vegetables.
Oxalate.
Oxalative. So that's things that have a lot of oxalates. So oxalates are these tiny little crystals that plants, so that means vegetables or seeds, generate to be able to protect themselves from being eaten. So they are sharp and they kind of hurt. And so if you're somebody who's sensitive to that, they show up in kidney stones or they show up in appendix stones. If you're sensitive to that, that might be what's causing the discomfort when you're trying to get more of the clean carbs in. And some like high offenders of that I was eating a lot of, and I pulled them out and noticed an immediate difference, were almonds and spinach. So there's a little bit of research on this. If this is something you're struggling with, we're happy to share it. When we talk about gut, the only thing to really highlight here, because I think the gut has gotten a lot of conversation in media, is the difference between the prebiotic and the probiotics. The prebiotics are the things that kind of lay the groundwork for the good bacteria to grow. And the probiotics are when you try to actually drop in the good bacteria. And most of the research we've looked at now says those really are better off as whole food formats than supplement formats. So if you're struggling with gut, those are kind of the two rules of thumb. And then the last thing around kind of when are you eating? You know, no day is ever perfect, but there are some days when we're actually trying to try to time our meals. And the new news for us was really how critical it is to eat first thing in the morning, and especially if you're working out, how critical it is to go into that workout with fuel, how important it is to stop eating as early as you can in the evening, and then trying to allow as possible 3 to 4 hours between meals. So I think the exciting news is there's been a ton of research in the world of intermittent fasting and conversations about fasting, and that research has come around so far to get deep into what type of fasting works with female physiology. And the quick and easy headline is, for female physiology, most of the research is showing now that the extreme intermittent fasting is a negative. It generates cortisol in our systems, and it actually undoes all the work we're trying to do. So it's a great thing to eat a little bit, 10 to 12 grams of carbohydrates, 10 to 12 grams of protein before your workout, and then to follow up that workout with 30 grams of protein is kind of some guidelines or rules of thumb. I think I've already hit on all of these, so I'm also being mindful of time. We're already at 11, so I'm going to cruise through here. This we just flash up here. There's a bunch highlighted. We are fans of supplements. We're fans of whole foods first, but sometimes you just can't get it all in. So these are the supplements that Jen and I both take and think of as worth putting into your supplement stack. We're happy to share this list with Ashley to distribute later. And then I'm going to jump into connection and community. And this one, Dr. Jen, you do a great job bringing this one to life because it's the science and the research behind it's big.
Yeah, it's been more and more that, and maybe you all have seen it, Harvard's longest running research study ever, and probably the greatest predictor of our longevity is having one high quality relationship in our 50s. So the importance, it's a better driver and a better predictor of longevity than almost anything else that we have, which I think is shocking how powerful that is for our overall health. So when we get busy, this is often the thing that falls away, right? We say, oh, I'll return that phone call tomorrow, or I'll go for that walk or meet for that coffee later. There really is no later. Like, time is of the essence to really, really cultivate our relationships now, because we know that loneliness escalates as we age, and it is more damaging to our health than smoking or drinking. And those are shocking statistics when we look at that. So I think, carve out the time, make it a priority, and you will reap the benefits tenfold.
Awesome.
That's fun.
Also related to community and connection is sex. So this is a topic we get into some of our workshops, but sexual health and staying sexually active actually is good for your health. So keep it in mind. And then lastly, the last pillar here, the beyond, and really the call out here is the science says, whatever you want to call it, it is so critical for your ability to thrive in your high half, especially to believe in something greater than ourselves. And that thing is a good, benevolent thing. So the idea of spirituality, whether it's in religion or whatever context is authentic, is one that is a time investment well spent in right now. And then I think the last thing I'm going to stop on here, just so we've got time if there are any questions, is I think this work is super exciting. Arthur Brooks is who brought it to life, so it's gotten some play in the media as well, strength by strength. But he pulled this work from science that's from the 1960s and continues to be built on, is how our intelligence changes as we age. So they're really fine-tuned, like skill acquisition intelligence. Like you can think of it if you're a sports athlete or a musician, or even if you're an attorney or in the investment world, the tactical skills peak in our 30s, 40s, but the synthesis skills and what we can think of maybe as wisdom skills and intelligence expand. So it's exciting when you're thinking about what's going on in this high half of life to lean in to that wisdom and that synthesis capability and deploy it. You're building on a strength curve that's rising. And there is, again, as I kind of opened with that Jen and I are excited about this midlife cohort, there is so much to share and give, and you are the best qualified to do it. So leaning into that when we think about work. And then Ashley, I'll pause here, and if people want to ask any questions.
Great. That was awesome. That was so much good content. I'm like, oh, we need a workshop on every one of those.
That is fun. That's what's fun, is to be able to do the deep dive on each one.
But yeah, I think everyone can unmute if they, oh, Susan looks like, are you raising? Oh, you're clapping. Oh, good. So Susan liked it. Does anyone have a question? I think people can unmute themselves, jump in. We got an intimate group. Come on, Cheryl. I know you probably have a question. I saw you taking notes.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
Okay, Emily, go ahead.
Well, I've had like, I did a function health analysis of my blood work and urine, and have been following, Ashley's program and the podcast and stuff. I'm feeling overwhelmed with this stuff. I feel like I need to change. Are there any ones that are more important? And then how do we incorporate the change slowly so it doesn't seem overwhelming?
That is the question, right? That's the question. And so when Jen and I talk about this with people, I kind of briefly describe this idea of, if you can imagine a square or 2x2, there's not one answer, right? There's not one change that's like super most important, but one way to process it for yourself could be to spend 15 minutes, like looking at each one of these pillars, and you just give yourself a score and go, okay, I think I'm pretty good on mindset. I got the nourishment down, movement, where I need is sleep, or, where is it you want to start? So look at the 6, give yourself a little score, 1 to 5, and then start with the one where you think there's the most opportunity to move the score. And then within that bucket, that 2x2 idea is, okay, all these ideas that I've heard about sleep, and they're out there, right? Like everybody's talking about something in each one of these pillars. Which ones feel like they would resonate with me to try? And then which ones feel like high to low have science? And do that intersection. This one, I feel like I could try it. And this one I feel like has enough science. And so some of the easy examples that I would give is, for sleep, one of the highest impact things for me has been to wear an eye mask and to have white noise, because I can take it with me everywhere and I travel a ton. So I have the same sleep environment wherever I am, with white noise and an eye mask. Super easy to implement. And science says cold, dark, and quiet. So I can handle dark and quiet with those 2 simple things. The flip side of that is, like, when all the cold plunge stuff was coming on, like, lots of science, sounds really hard, don't want to do it. So just picking things that resonate in that quadrant would be an approach. But Jen, do you have any specific ones to try?
No, I think you're spot on there, Linz. I think the other thing is, like, I think we tend to set these like crazy goals that I am going to fix my sleep in a week, and that's just not attainable. So I think, one, have a little grace when you start these behavior changes, that it's not linear, right? And real life interrupts everything we're trying to do. And then celebrate your wins. And then also, I would say that with Linz's kind of formula, it's very helpful to say, okay, I'm going to commit to this for 3 weeks or 4 weeks. And not everything works for every person. So just because Linz and I said to try it, or whoever podcast you're listening to says to try it, that doesn't mean if it's not working for you, keep going, right? So be okay with letting some things go, and know that this is kind of your personal journey. And so And then I think the last point is celebrate the wins. So if movement's what you're working on and your goal is to increase your movement 1 day a week, or start with something attainable and celebrate that win instead of feeling so overwhelmed where we don't know where to start. So I tend to take a lot of things off the list because I feel a sense of pride when I get through the list. And then as I gain more confidence in this behavior change, I start to add either additional tasks to the list or increasing the complexity of what I'm wanting to try.
That's so great. My name's Cheryl, and I just want to say thank you guys so much. And Emily, you're right. When you go into a deep dive of 40 minutes of information, it can be overwhelming. But what I love about your platform and the messaging is the way you break it down into pillars, and that actually keep it simple. Like everything that you guys talk about, I think that a lot of us have at least some knowledge of this, but to just really slow down and keep it simple and be present. And to your point, it's not what you can't do, it's what you can do, and watch for those kind of micro movements of celebration. And it is so aligned with Sully's strength because there's a simplification in this dynamic exercise, and she's got like some killer merchandise that says just that, strength simplified. But
Yes, I got my tank top.
It's like life consciousness simplified, right? And it is about finding your tribe, your community, and even like-minded businesses and platforms and consciousness. Because there is a fluidity and a similarity in a lot of this, what's happening in the longevity space. But you guys, for as intelligent and accomplished as you are, your messaging is really approachable, sensible, and I don't know, I feel confident to be able to make some cool changes. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Anyone else? Sarah, what do you think? Nothing?
I loved every minute of
Oh.
it. I would like to just move in and like and be a shadow puppy for a week and like watch how this is implemented. I love how each part builds on the next in terms of sort of like my priorities are similar. Like you can't even get started without your mindset. And I love to talk about the brain all day. And like about productivity, my grandma used to say that God can't steer a parked car.
That's a great expression. That's so great.
I mean, even if you take your foot off the brake, the car is going to move. So that's all the mindset you need to get started. And so thank you so much for the presentation. It was awesome.
Thank you. I love that expression. I'm going to be crediting you. Use it now.
And Linsly and Dr. Jen, are you guys both doing Sully's Strength? Are you guys both doing the BFR workouts?
Yeah. So we still got started about a year ago. So my experiment, because N of one, my experiment with Sully's Strength was probably May of 2024, and I did a 30-day experiment. And then I saw the metrics, right? Like I could do a lot more push-ups. I could do a longer wall sit. Yeah. And so then I did the 6-month program starting last September, and that just continues. The thing I love about the Sully's Strength program is I can take it on the road. Like, so I am traveling. So my BFR bands come with me, and it's like they've been to Morocco, they've been to Paris, and it's like they're going wherever. So I love it.
Great.
Yep.
Yep. I have a question that I would love to, I don't know. I know a nutritionist from Stanford that does research, but I would love to study. So the nutrition and protein and women as you get older that need more protein because our body doesn't get into protein synthesis as easily. So we need the protein to push us there. But BFR helps us get into protein synthesis much more easily. And I wonder if you're doing BFR and you're timing your protein, do you really need that full amount? Because I've played with it and I've gained muscle over the last couple of years, and I'm not eating the amount that you're eating close to. But anyway, I don't know. Nobody probably knows that answer, but I'm just like wondering, like, because Gabrielle Lyon says the reason is because we got to get into protein synthesis. But what if we have another way to get into protein synthesis?
That's a great question. I think that'd be a fun one to research. I mean, I know you did the research project last fall, but I think that'd be a great one to research because, it really is hard. The volume of nutrient, food, whether it's a shake or if you're vegetarian or carnivore, just a lot like to get in, especially, to me, it's more important for my health and sleeping to stop eating. That's 3 hours before bedtime. So if I haven't gotten my protein in, I'm going to stop. Like I trade off the volume close to bed with protein. So you're always kind of figuring out what's the most important one to choose between.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
Jen, how's life at Canyon Ranch?
It's awesome. It's busy. I apologize my crazy schedule, but it's awesome. We'd love for any of you to come and join us. We have Arthur Brooks twice a year too, if you want to come listen to him. It's great. It's the one place where I feel like I can serve people the way I would like to, with this truly integrated, holistic, world-class experts in each of these pillars that I can walk a guest from one to the next and their whole experience is complete and nobody's running around town and nobody's chasing appointments. So it's awesome. We'd love to welcome any of you when you would like to come.
We need to have a Selly Strength retreat there, sounds like.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And if they want to do a BFR workshop at any time, let me know.
We do want to do a BFR workshop. That's on my list to talk to you about. We used to have a BFR kind of provider who left before my time there. So that was one of the first things I said we needed to bring back. So we're working on it. Okay. I'll be in touch very soon. We're getting close.
I love it.
I will.
Wow.
Awesome. Well, I don't know about the rest of you. I wish we had more time because I do feel like there's so much more to dive in. Maybe we'll have to figure out something at some point to do. I know at one point we talked about doing an event and then that got kind of sidetracked, I think, because of my neck surgery actually. But anyway,
I have one
revisit. Yeah, Shauna.
Do you have any of this content like targeted for cancer survivorship? Or is this well, obviously it would work for survivors. I just wonder if you have language and, resources specifically for cancer survivors.
That's a great question.
We have not crafted that between Linz and I. I will tell you, in my other professional life at Canyon Ranch, we do, and it does exist. But we have not done that personally.
Yeah. Okay. On the mindset front, some of the best work that I've seen around mindset came out of cancer recovery research, and it was out of the Good Science Center. Out of Oakland and Berkeley area. And that was where all of the positive mindset from Marty Seligman's work was being deployed, was helping cancer survivorship as well as, 10, 15, 20 years afterwards. So that on the mindset piece, at least I know there's deep research there.
Thanks.
And I'm sorry to ask, I missed a few minutes of the opening today, but Dr. Jen, are you, is that your residence at Canyon Ranch or are you a guest, talent there, or how does that work?
I'm the Chief Health and Performance Officer. So I oversee
all
of our, no, it's totally okay. Okay. So I oversee all of our wellness programming.
Wow. That's so cool.
Across properties. Yeah. It's been fun. It's a relatively new role for me. I guess I can't really say that anymore, but I can say that, Linz. Thanks.
What, 6 months or what's it been now?
5. Yeah, we're 5 months in.
That's still new. That's still relatively.
I think you can say that for a year. I think you got it.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Canyon Ranch has such an incredible brand of making such a huge difference in people's lives for so many different reasons. That's amazing. High five.
It's thank you very much. It's a very motivating and wonderful place to work.
Wow. Yeah. Cool.
That's awesome. I'm definitely up for if anyone wants to go out there,
Yeah.
let me know. We'll plan some.
Let me know. Let me know. We'll get it all set up.
Let's do it.
Awesome.
Okay.
Well, thanks so much
Wonderful.
for your time, you guys. I know you're both super busy and this means a lot. And
Love it.
yeah, if there's a way to get, I don't know if you could share the slides or a way to get some of that content
Yeah, definitely.
that was kind of dense that we could kind of look at.
Yeah.
That would
Absolutely.
Definitely.
awesome.
Absolutely.
Especially the
Thanks,
one about supplements.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. The
Thank
Substack.
you. Thank
You guys,
you.
thank you so much. You're doing great
Thanks,
stuff.
everybody.
Yeah.
Take care.
Great to see
everyone.
you all.
Bye.
Bye.